have a quorum. If Marie joins, I'll take note of that. So for the preamble.
Well, I have to call the meeting to order first, right? So
yes.
Let's call the meeting to order. This is Pedestrian and Bicyclist Advisory Committee on Tuesday, July the 7th, 2020. And Rebecca is going to read the preamble.
Okay. This is the preamble for publicly open electronic meetings. Good evening. Due to the coronavirus pandemic and pursuant to Governor Sununu's emergency order number 12 issued on March 23, 2020, in accordance with Executive Order 2024, this public body is authorized to meet electronically without a quorum physically present in the same location. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting. However, in accordance with Emergency Order 12, we have taken action to provide public access to the meeting by telephone with additional access by video, provide public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting, and provide a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are problems with access. For this meeting, the video and call-in functions of Microsoft Teams software are being used as a communication platform. At this meeting, all members of the committee have the ability to communicate contemporaneously, and the public has access to contemporaneously listen, and if necessary, participate in the meeting by visiting lebanon.nh.gov/live and navigating to the pertinent listed meeting. Instructions on how to attend by telephone are provided on this webpage. To assist in the preparation of the meeting minutes and to ensure all participants are aware of who is participating, all speakers are asked to identify themselves and to spell their first and last names before beginning to speak. To improve sound quality and reduce the amount of feedback in the system, please ensure your microphones are muted unless you are asking a question or making a comment. If anybody has a problem with access during the course of the meeting, please call 617-600-8646 or email owens, OWENS, @lebanonnh.gov. In the event that there are technical difficulties and we are unable to hold the meeting, it will be adjourned and rescheduled. All votes taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. The meeting will begin with taking a roll call attendance. When each member states their name, please state whether there is anyone in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under RSA 91-A. I think I'm ready to be a flight attendant.
Okay, thanks, Rebecca. I appreciate you reading that. So we'll do the roll call. This is Colin Smith. No one in the room with me. Jake?
Jake Kelleher, also no one in the room.
Erling?
Erling Heisted, no one in the room.
Alan?
Alan Schnorr, and no one is in the room with me.
Cliff?
Clifton Below, alternate, on the porch by myself.
Alex?
Alex Valens here. I'm currently alone. Rebecca Osborne, my partner, may be in and out of the room.
All right. Marie?
Yes, I am alone.
And I think you have a new member to call upon.
Okay. TM, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, this is Tom Martz, and I'm a member of the City Planning Board, and I am here and alone.
Okay, and then
right,
finally,
sorry. Go ahead, Rebecca.
Well, this is Rebecca Owens, planning staff. I am alone. So I guess we should go back to the new member part. Tom, if you just want to say anything more about yourself, you're welcome to.
Okay, well, I'm retired. I moved to Lebanon, New Hampshire in 2016 and moved over from Bangor, Maine. I spent 40 years in higher education at 8 different universities, so a lot of experience in a lot of different locales, and and a lot of them that were involved with bicycle and pedestrian issues. I grew up in Bloomington, Indiana, and some of you who might be bicyclists may remember a movie that became sort of a cult thing in the 1970s called Breaking Away. It was filmed in Bloomington, Indiana, at Indiana University, and I was involved with that.
Okay, we're very happy to have a planning board representative finally. So if things come up as we go, I know this is a new role for you, but if there are relevant planning board topics, you're welcome to chime in. And there is a specific part on the study items of the agenda, which you should all be able to see right now. So we'll be able to have a specific update for that soon. So without further ado, I'll turn it back over to Colin.
All right. Well, Tom, thanks for volunteering to represent the planning board on the committee. It's great to have you. Before I move on, I'd like to appoint Cliff in place of Sarah for tonight. And let's move on to the approval of minutes. Are there any comments on the June 2nd, 2020 minutes?
I know I did receive some.
This is Alex. Just to clarify, I am non-voting tonight.
Thank you. Yes, we skipped over that. Thanks, Alex.
Yep, no problem.
Sorry, Rebecca, I think you were going to say about the minutes.
Yeah, I believe that Alan had some comments about what was summarized for the crash analysis. And I think that instead of going into specific detail, unless he would like to at this time for those police reports, moving forward, so that the accuracy is ensured, if there is an analysis that's part of the minutes, I would share that draft with him beforehand. But Alan, is there anything with this set that you wanted to call out specifically?
Yes, Alan here. In the first paragraph, the police reports. This is different than my version, but so the first paragraph, Mr. Schnur, that should be between 2006 and 2019.
Okay. I don't know where the numbers went on the side, so thanks for describing.
So the on page 3, the first paragraph.
Yep, I found it.
Okay. Throughout the document, for all the paragraphs, we should specify when it's pedestrian bicycle involved crashes and when it's pedestrian involved crashes. There are separate categories there.
Okay.
So that should be specified. Towards the middle of the first paragraph, where it says that by October, that Mr. Schnur emphasized that the data shows that pedestrian involved crashes are more frequent and injuries are worse in crashes that occur after dark. So to revise that sentence.
Okay.
So the two aspects there. One is that there are more frequent crashes for pedestrians at night, and that there are also more serious. Another one is that the median age of pedestrians. So this is the 1 to 3rd paragraph in that section. The median age of pedestrians involved in crashes. So instead of those, should be pedestrians involved in crashes from 2016 to 2019. That should be added. This was data before 2016. So that, again, the first sentence in the 3rd paragraph, the median age of pedestrians involved in crashes from 2016 to 2019 was 57 years.
57. Where did I get that?
And There was one I thought was even more important piece of information that is left off, to add in a sentence after that. The median age for pedestrians in parking lots was 69.4 years.
I missed you. Your words were just garbled a bit. So the median age for pedestrians, what?
The median age for pedestrians in parking lot crashes
okay.
was 69.4 years.
Okay.
So that's the 69.4 is a bit more serious than 53 even.
Okay.
And I think that's about all. The rest the rest we can you'll adjust it to go through and see where it needs to
Sure. Thank you. Thanks. It's been quite interesting taking such fast handwritten minutes as we go through these. So I appreciate the assistance, Alan.
Yeah, no, it's a complicated presentation. Thank you for your minutes. Appreciate it.
Okay. Are there any other amendments? Sounds like that's it, Colin.
Okay. Just before we go to a motion and vote, I just realized, so I'd appointed Cliff, Sarah. Can I appoint Alex in place of the vacant Friends of the Northern Rail Trail position? Or not?
As long as it's not like a council position, I believe you can do that.
Okay.
We've done other committees.
I can't quite hear who's talking.
Cliff, if that's you, your audio is not coming through.
Can you write it in the chat, maybe, Cliff, and I'll read it?
No, just forget. It doesn't. Can you hear me?
No.
I just heard you say, "Can you hear me?" So that
Very odd.
But the words before that we could
Okay. Sorry. But you can move on. I think it was significant. I was just saying that I couldn't board the committees today. So I was just, I'm not council representative.
Cliff, we only have robot Cliff. We don't have we can't really hear you. So Rebecca, as far as you know, you think we can
Well, I mean, it sounded like Cliff had something to say. Cliff, can you write in the chat function if it's something affecting that action?
Alan here, I was looking at the Pedbike website on the city website, and it mentioned that one position is vacant.
Yeah.
So it didn't specify who was that vacancy for.
Yeah.
So I would think if a position is vacant, then Alex could fill that vacant position.
Yeah,
and he has applied to be a regular member as well.
All right. So I'm going to take that with advisement well, we have.
Okay, Clifton wrote, yes, other committees do that.
Okay. Perfect. All right. So Alex, I'm appointing you in place for the vacant seat. Is there a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
So move.
Okay. So motion made by Erling. Is there a second?
Alex seconds.
Okay, second by Alex. So we'll do a roll call vote then. This is Colin. I vote in favor of the motion. Jake?
Yes, in favor.
Okay, Erling?
Erling Heisted votes yes.
Clifton?
Clifton votes yes.
Alex?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Alex votes yes.
Alan?
Alan Schnur votes yes, agree.
Marie?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Okay. Did I miss anyone? No. Okay, so it's unanimous then. I believe 9-0. All right, let's move on to the updates from other boards. And Rebecca, would you like to start us off with the planning office update, please?
Yeah, so there's a continued review for the planning board to consider 10 and 14 Bank Street at the next planning board meeting this coming Monday. I haven't noted anything significant from past considerations by this committee. The one that I would like to call attention to is 343 Mount Support Road, which is the Saxon Partners project, which will be called the MREC, which is 250 studios and 1-bedroom apartments. That project has been identified before, but they've presented some materials more recently that I think are more illustrative than some past applications that we've seen, in part because of feedback that this committee and staff have been providing in terms of circulation and bike storage and so on. So I thought it would be worth, if Colin, you think it's okay at this point, to just show a few of the sample slides for a minute, just to so this committee knows that you're having an impact on projects, and this is, you know, a significant project.
Yeah, please go ahead, Rebecca.
Okay, so let me know, but in a minute you should be able to see a PDF that says proposed housing development.
Yeah,
We got it.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to go down a page or two, and so this slide 4 of a recent presentation on June 8th by the applicant discusses some of their modifications to the site and adjacent to the site, which you know, adjacent site improvements are not always a given, but they have recognized the need for these improvements. So up on the what is the north side of the property where my mouse is, that kind of L-shaped yellow area, this was already a fire access lane, but they're also going to now have it be more of a pedestrian access with a crosswalk over Mount Support Road to the multi-use path on Mount Support Road. That was not originally part of the application, and I think everyone would probably agree that's a good addition. They had already planned going further south on Mount Support Road, a crosswalk with signage and potentially signalization near where their main vehicle access is, to get not only to the multi-use path, but to connect to advanced transit bus stops that they've continued to discuss placement of with advanced transit. So I don't want to zoom in right now just so we can move through this quickly, but I'd be happy to send this presentation or a link to it to anyone who wants to look at the details further. There's some other details I'll call out as well. There's an accessible walkway from around the center area of the site that zigzags up the slope right between where it says Mount Support Road and the building. So that will get people up to the bus stop area where needed. For the bus stops on the west side of Mount Support Road and the crossings, they'll add additional portions of sidewalk. There's no sidewalk on that side right now in that area. They have also proposed a dog park and some outdoor amenity areas, connections to the trail system that goes toward the Boston lot. They're going to construct 306 parking spaces versus the 325 that were permitted. So a bit less parking. Let's see, I'm going to go down to the next slide a bit. Other bike-friendly features, they write on this slide, potential location for Ster bike share station. I don't think I've seen that beyond some, maybe not even beyond Dartmouth College. And considering that this was submitted as a presentation in June, I don't think they're necessarily changing a lot due to the pandemic. They're taking an optimistic view to the future of shared equipment.
Yeah. Rebecca, did Zagster pull out of Dartmouth?
Say that again?
Did the bike share program close at Dartmouth?
I can get an update on that. That is a good question. So, they say potential. It could be another. They're not the only game in town. Right. I think they were looking for some outfit that was already in the area. So the other things to know are bike storage, and I especially want to pause on that aspect and go down to their slide 13 and 14. Oops. Go here maybe. So they're saying that they are estimating to have bike storage spaces for about half of the occupants, or I guess they're saying half a space per apartment, so every other apartment. But they also plan to have additional storage area that's more general that could be used for bike storage, and they really don't want bikes coming up and down the hallways and elevators. So by their wording, I don't have a specific number, but by their wording and that estimated amount, that's a lot more than we've seen on some other projects. So the next two slides talk about the locations of the bike storage. They would have some, not just in one area, but indoor and outdoor near their common areas. And then there would be overflow area in their parking garage where there are storage lockers. And then for the actual potential design, they have some stalls conceptualized, and it looks like they might have a product or two in mind, and then some denser bike rack storage that I think would be more long-term for maybe the less frequent users. Again, I don't know the exact placement or number of each types, but they're getting at the specifications that we've been requesting. So this is all helpful. I think that's all I really wanted to show. If there are questions, I'm happy to pass them on. And like I said, I can share the material here.
Will they be charging for bike storage, or will that be guaranteed to the residents?
Great question. Great question.
This is Alex. This is more of a general question. I'm just curious. Is the bike storage, are they putting that on based on a recommendation from the city, or is that a condition of approval? And
it's a recommendation.
Okay, gotcha. So
because
there's nothing.
We have it in the draft regulation updates, and we made them aware that we're working to amend the regulations. So at this time, it could only be a recommendation.
Right. Okay.
And not a condition.
Got it. Thank you.
But Rebecca, just to sort of reiterate that, I think the intention is that it will be a requirement as soon as those regulations get updated. Right. So
with actual quantitative, formulas.
Yeah. Rebecca, could you just and sorry if you said this and I didn't quite missed it. What do they have a number of or a capacity of bikes in their kind of storage areas that they
They
mentioned?
said they're estimating to have half a space for every unit, so it would be probably 125 storage
Okay.
spaces between the
Yeah.
indoor and outdoor. It wasn't broken down, but I'll look forward to seeing what they say on Monday and might check what their most recent materials are.
Okay.
Is that storage combined indoor and outdoor, or is that?
I believe so. Let me go back to that slide where it mentions it. It says, it just says spaces. It doesn't say total.
Yeah. Okay. What's the number in the draft regulations?
You had to ask.
It doesn't matter if you don't remember. You know, don't.
Yeah, I could open it up. I just don't necessarily. I think as part of what I give feedback for Monday night's meeting, it would be at least useful for them to hear that the Ped Bike Committee is pleased to see that it's really close to the number proposed in our regulations, to see that it is possible and makes sense. So, and Tom Martz is probably thinking deeply about this as he's been involved with the subcommittee on the review of the development regulations for the planning board. So, but we can't really comment on active applications in terms of a decision basis and regulatory updates at this time. What comments we can make are comments we'd like to see, like design changes for this application.
For the units, which would be half of them that don't have bike storage space, is there room in their other storage area for a bicycle?
Yeah, that's what they're saying. They're saying that there will be additional storage in the parking garage for general storage that could be used for bikes. And that's something the draft regulation updates indicate is flexibility to allow for that. So that's a good question.
It'd be nice if they had a place for bikes to be stored one way or another for everybody, so we can encourage everybody to ride.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't have a place to keep a bike, then it's sort of going to discourage the active use of.
So are you saying, Erling, that having general storage space might not be enough for everyone?
I'd want to make sure that there was enough within general storage. So if they didn't have space within their bike storage designated area, that they did have an alternative place to keep a bike.
Well, going back to the slide 13, it says current building design could accommodate a bike for every unit via the areas that they have shown in their design next to the amenity and along the parking garage wall. So I'm reading that to say they believe that there is enough space for everyone to have, for every unit to have a bike.
It'd be nice to have that as a prereq for developments.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So,
right.
and then going back to that other bullet, bike storage and general storage areas are interchangeable and adjustments can be made, they're saying, to those spaces later on if there's more demand. I'm reading between the lines on that.
Yeah.
Hey, Rebecca, along the lines of what Erling just brought up, could we ask them to put in some bike racks for visitors? You know, in addition, if the place was overflowing with bikes, you know, bike racks could be kind of overflow storage, so to speak. A lot of people, especially young people like this is going to be, they're fine with bike racks oftentimes.
Yeah, I think.
Sometimes. Go ahead.
Well, I think this slide 5, it's not detailed very well. I would have to go to look at the drawings, but this, where my mouse is, right under where it says amenity building, I believe those are going to be outdoor racks for visitors or short-term use.
I see.
But I like some of the other things, like, I'll confirm that. Because we had specifically noted that in prior feedback.
The other thing, it may be kind of a nit in the grand scheme, but how do people feel about the this particular project has connector trails to the Boston lot? I don't know if I have strong feelings one way or the other. On the other hand, there is a part of me that says, well, maybe the existing entryways are sort of what everybody likes and what we've gotten by with, and maybe we don't necessarily want additional places to enter that expansive area. You know, I don't know. I don't know if it's an issue. I don't want to bring up issues that aren't issues, but I remember when
might be a can of worms, but you asked the question.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a part of me, I guess I'm repeating, part of me that says let's leave the entries where they are now and not create any new ones. But that would be, maybe that's more like a Parks and Recreation kind of a matter.
It's a Conservation Commission. I think they've given some feedback.
See. Oh, okay.
And Jake, I think if you didn't provide the formal trail access, you wouldn't be too long before you had informal trail access with that.
Okay.
Anyways, I think people would make their own path.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is Clifton. If I may say something.
Yeah.
I do think that, just people being able to walk out the door and walk into the woods is a really nice feature and something to encourage. And I think if people had to either ride a bike or take a walk or drive to the trailhead, that sort of would just be a discouraging, it's just a little thing extra that might reduce the use.
Yep.
But I think that's a big enough network that if, it's good to make it easy for people to walk into the woods.
I will also add that those trails that are in that area are some of the most challenging in terms of biking. So it would be, I don't know if UVMBA will report anything about folks trying to get out on there. They're quite challenging in that area, but very, very niche comment. Nothing really to add.
Really nice hiking trails, though. Getting people out into the woods.
Well, if it keeps people off the roads because they have recreation in their backyard, that's another possible attribute. Okay, well, I'm happy to field any other questions. Is that Marie?
No.
No, okay. Your image just popped up for me. Okay.
I did have one other comment, just about the parking. My mother-in-law lives in the Emerson place, and that complex has 2-bedroom units. So every unit has a parking space indoors. And a lot of people just put 1 or 2 bikes at the head of the parking space where it's undercover and it's in their space. And that seems to work quite well. So I don't know how many undercover parking spaces per unit there are, but that can, what they said is, I think, true. That can supply a lot of opportunities for indoor bike parking.
Yeah, and kind of to Marie's question about whether there would be charges for having dedicated bike storage or if it's first come, first serve, I guess it's a similar question for parking. Okay.
Yeah, I would add that we want to make sure that people are encouraged to bike and that having a bike is facilitated and that money isn't an obstacle to that where you have to jump through hoops and pay extra just to be able to put a bike on site.
Mm-hmm. So was that overview useful? Okay, I'm seeing a few heads nod.
It
Yeah,
was, yeah.
great.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Okay, well, stay tuned if you feel like it for the planning board meeting. Otherwise, I'll continue to provide updates. So let's see, next for planning office, not too much. The Miracle Mile bus stop location, they've ordered equipment, so it's actually happening. I spoke with city engineering. I guess this would come under the Greenway updates, but it's planning office. So spoke to city engineering about getting a conceptual design for an access between the Miracle Mile Plaza and the Greenway. And it's just such a steep area, and they don't really have the design tools that we might look at how to get an outside party to do that concept and then seek funding using the survey data from the Greenway survey. So bouncing around a little bit, but that was something that
So Rebecca,
got today. Mm-hmm.
is that like, you mean that is that sort of formalizing the the road that goes down from
Yeah,
the back of the by the movie down to
we've been talking to the plaza owners, and they asked to see a concept of what that design would be. Right now, they're moving toward formalizing just having public access, period, which actually reduces their liability, because when you allow recreational access on a private property, the New Hampshire RSA removes the private owner's liability.
Okay.
To summarize it.
Okay. So I'm still a bit. So what would have to be done? I mean, that road's there. It's just kind of, they're just letting people use it.
Yeah, we actually maybe at a later date I can detail it a bit more, but I'm trying not to to get too distracted before it's final. There's a lawyer who's providing pro bono assistance. He's a local lawyer familiar with the Greenway, and he's helping to draft up a cooperative agreement.
Okay.
So that would be a really good thing.
Yeah, so just
there are only two actual official accesses to the Greenway. You can't even count Glen Road, because that's actually not an official access.
Right.
I think that's it for my primary planning office updates.
Yeah. Rebecca, can I just ask one more question about the I don't quite understand what
I'm having trouble hearing you, Colin. Is anyone else having trouble hearing him?
I am also.
Can you try repeating that, Colin? Uh-oh. I don't know. Why is it so funny tonight with everyone? Oh, he wrote low bandwidth.
All right. So I my internet was about the city doesn't have the I think design capabilities. The access exists. It was just, I was under the impression it was just like a legal agreement to allow usage.
Yeah. So drainage
required.
I still can't hear everything you're saying, but you're saying that it's already an access, but with increased usage, what else would be required? I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Well, I think the bottom line is that the owner asked for a sketch, and that the recreation department has identified it as a possible area of improvement, because it is so steep, to make it more user friendly for inclusiveness of more user types, but we'll never get a fully ADA installation there using traditional means. It's about a 2-to-1 slope right now. So the types of improvements we would be looking at are maybe a retaining wall or low like wood landscaping, curbing, but then you have to consider drainage and icing and maintenance and the surface material type. I don't want to get too into the weeds. Again, maybe we can talk about this, Colin, on the phone when you have some better service, and go over it with David, because he had some ideas as well.
Right. So somebody in my household was trying to upload photos, so that was what that was. I just, you know, I would like to think through what, you know, the issues around, you know, requirements when you know that, and hopefully, you know, finding ways to not let those stand in the way of using a sort of an existing access.
I don't think I don't think that's the issue. I think they want they want to see more about the boundaries and impact to their property.
Okay.
I believe that if there's anything else planning office related that you have questions about, now's the time. Otherwise, I think I'm good.
Okay, great. And I assume we don't have anything on safe routes to school, right? Either.
Right.
So, Erling, do you want to give us a update on from the city council?
Well, we've all been waiting for Class 6 roads to come back to life, and we're one member closer. We've got one member yet to go. So that happened, and I suspect on our next meeting we will have the last member filled so that we can move forward, and that will have bike ped implications in terms of Class 6 roads, in terms of where mountain bikes could go or pedestrians could go. So that will be a matter of concern for the bike ped. We just continued the old road up Fellows Hill, and that is going to be, the property lot beside that is going to be sold, and the off Little Heater Road over by the fort is a folk street which has a lot on it, which is also going to be thrown, the road will be thrown up, and the property divided, or property sold, and the road divided between two property abutters. The main part of the last meeting was Chief Mello giving a report on policing in Lebanon, and he gave a very involved and well-presented explanation of what the policies are and have been for being compassionate policemen. And that was very, very well done. So other than that, that's kind of what we've got, I think.
All right, thanks, Erling. Alan, do you want to give us any updates on the police reports? Sorry, I should skipped over Tom inadvertently. So Tom, I don't know if you have anything that you'd like to add to Rebecca's updates from the planning board.
Not really. I think Rebecca did a great job of giving that report. We have had, what would you say, Rebecca, about 6 meetings so far on regarding the regulations, and I think the last one was really one where we were tackling a lot of things related to bicycle and pedestrian, but particularly things like storage and showers and things like that. So I think it's moving along. I think when we're finished with it, then Rebecca, if I'm correct, this then is taken to the full board, and the full board will have the presentation by the committee, and then it moves on from there.
Yeah, they're correct, Tom. There are a few other updates that Tim Corwin and I think like Clifton Buelow has suggested some site lighting updates, which could be seen as related to the degree that they address parking lot safety, for example. So we have a few more rounds to go through, but we don't want to let things pile up too much more so that the whole document is one giant red line before giving it to the full board. So I think we're getting closer and closer.
Okay, and the only other thing I would add is that I see there's a / planning board and / CIP, which I am actually a volunteer to serve on the capital improvements program. So, but we don't have anything to report yet because I think we're having a couple of meetings this month. I haven't heard from David Brooks about when that's going to take place, but I'm surely have to believe that the impact of the coronavirus is going to have some impact on city budgets. So stay tuned.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Okay, Alan, now it's your turn for the police reports.
According to the city manager's update for the month of May, there were 0 crashes involving pedestrians or bicyclists, which is reassuring since May is over the data showing it's the highest month for crashes, but for this year was 0. No doubt the COVID response has something to do with that, although we do know that the fatalities in the state are up, even though traffic is down. So for 2020, so far, it still remains 3 crashes involving pedestrians or bicyclists so far up until the end of May. That's all for me.
Alan, thank you. I just wanted to add to that. So that email that I sent, I guess, a week ago now, I have to remember this myself, but I think we're moving toward calling these incidents crashes, not accidents. So it's good that you're reinforcing that for us. I have been playing a lot of back and forth with the fire department to get that EMS data. And the latest I heard is that it's not very granular. They bucket pedestrians, bicyclists, and other non-motor vehicle crashes all together. So whatever we get, we'll have to see how informative it is. But that said, they do share their data with the National Highway and Traffic Safety Administration, which I think they do get into more detail, and when they publish their numbers on pedestrian and bicyclist crashes, somehow they break it out. So I'm looking forward to actually having that loop closed, and I'll let you know when I get it.
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. That'll be useful. But even if they're giving the total data for non-motor vehicle, that would be good for us because that's what we're probably missing from the police reports. If a bicycle hits a pedestrian or a snowmobile hits a pedestrian, that may not get picked up by the police data. So that would be useful for us.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thanks, Alan. So on the Greenway, I think, thanks. We've heard Rebecca's update on the access from the Miracle Mile. Alex, is there anything on the survey that you could give us a quick update on?
Yeah, sure. So I checked this morning and we had 840 responses, which is awesome. I thought we would have maybe half of that. So that was pretty cool to see. We got a lot of assistance from Rebecca and Chrissy and Rec and Parks and a lot of other partners in getting the word out about that. And Rebecca and I both tried to get the Valley News to write a little something about it, and they declined. Well, they didn't respond, but we did get a letter to the editor published today. So I'd plan to close it tomorrow, but we'll leave it open through the weekend to
Did
see
you
if we
say
get
it was
any traction.
published or you submitted?
It was published today.
Oh, it was. Okay.
Way down at the bottom.
Okay. Hey, that's pretty good.
Under all the political battles. Yeah, so we'll leave it open, I think, through the end of the weekend to see what kind of boost we get from that. And then, yeah, we'll get to work on analyzing the results.
Super, that's great. Be a nice big data set to take a look at.
One comment, if I may, on here, that I think this can demonstrate the community's support and appreciation for the Greenway. There's always been tremendous support with donations from the campaign committee. So I think this high turnout reflects the publicity given and the hard work of Alex and Rebecca and others to get the word out. But I think it can also reflect the appreciation of the community for this Greenway.
Yeah, I would second that. I don't see, at least in my time here, a lot of engagement exercises with such high participation, and it is to the level that it, I think when the results are in, we would probably want to have some kind of an informational flyer that and/or presentation, even to the council level. Clifton and Erling might have comments on that, but because so much could be done in terms of property and funding and so on down the road, the continued support is needed, and this really backs it up.
Right. Yeah. I guess I have just one other thing on the Greenway, which is a less fun thing. Those of you who've been on it recently may have noticed a bit of an uptick in the quantity of graffiti and other minor vandalism. So I just wanted to encourage anyone who does, if anyone does see that when they're down there, to let both let Parks and Rec know and also report it to the police. All right. Let me see. So Class 6 roads, I think Erling covered that in his update from the council. Alex, is there anything on State of New Hampshire that you wanted to share?
Yeah, a couple of quick things. One, we did get an update about the state pedestrian and bicycle plan. So if you'll recall from the last couple of meetings, I had mentioned that it had been kind of put on hold, mostly due to the bike ped engineer at DOT retiring amid state government hiring freeze. So that hiring freeze is still in place, but we got an update that they've extended the contract with Alta Planning and Design, who's the consultant on that, out another year. So pretty uncertain as to when that process will restart, because it will be first the hiring freeze gets lifted, and then DOT will go through what is probably a fairly long process to hire someone else. And we'll see even what their kind of funding looks like, if they have the budget to add more staff or not. So I know there would have, in terms of what we're looking at locally and regionally in terms of bicycle and pedestrian and complete streets planning, it would be nice to have, it would have been nice to have that in place to help inform that in terms of knowing what the priorities at the state level would be. But it was at least good to get some level of update, which we had been kind of waiting on for a few months. So not a particularly encouraging update, but it's at least being talked about.
Okay, thanks, Alex. I don't have any update on the rails to trails. I haven't heard from Ken or Dick in the last month with an update. So we'll move on to Alex. I think he's going to do a presentation on FHWA
Yeah,
that's-
and just a reminder, everyone, if especially because we're doing a presentation, if you don't mind putting yourselves on mute. Thank you.
And Rebecca, were you going to try to share the slides?
Yeah, let me do
Okay.
that.
I will say, I don't know how big of a document it was that you had open before when you were looking at the Mount Support Road plan, but there was kind of a lag. In the,
Yeah, I've experienced that before. Let me close some things and maybe that'll help.
if there is an issue, I believe this got sent out to everyone, so we can give it a shot. And if it's not working, folks could open up the presentation in another browser tab or something like that, and I can just tell when to go to the next slide.
Well, at this point, you should see it on my screen.
I do. Do you want to try just clicking through a couple slides and see if it goes? Okay.
You want me to stay here?
Yeah, okay. Well, that seemed to work, so let's give it a shot. So, yeah, real quick before I dive in. So Rebecca and I had talked about giving this little overview on bicycle planning, bicycle facility planning. And a couple of reasons for that. One is at the regional level, as I've mentioned a few times, we're working on our regional corridor plan. And so that's a planning effort that will hopefully identify and support the development of projects that will improve bicycle access and mobility. And then we've talked with this committee and with the city about doing some level of complete streets planning at the local level. So, and on top of all that, I recently completed an 8-hour training on bicycle facility planning, and I always like to use that as an opportunity to share some of the knowledge that I recently learned. So I just wanted to provide this as a quick overview of kind of what goes into bicycle planning, and hopefully it's a useful resource for the committee. We will put this up on the city website afterwards. I also just want to mention really quick, please let me know if there's any terms or any kind of jargon that you're not familiar with as I go through this. I kind of tried to tailor it to this audience who thinks about bicycles and pedestrian planning quite a lot. But if there's, if you don't know what I'm talking about, feel free to raise your hand or jump in. And we could definitely answer questions or talk about this at the end in terms of what the applications might be for this committee. So with all that said, want to start just at a high level really quick with a brief overview of what transportation planning is. Basically, it can be summarized up as taking an identified need or issue and moving through a process to develop and implement some sort of improvement, whether that is an infrastructure project or something a little more light than that, if you will. So, the first two in there are really kind of what we look at in terms of the planning process. And then the green box, implementing improvements, is where we move from planning to engineering and construction. You can go to the next slide, Rebecca.
Okay. Oh, that is a little slower.
Yeah.
It's not even changing on my end. Hold on 1 second.
Okay.
I'm seeing a little clock thing. Maybe if I get out of full screen mode. Wow, I'm really frozen.
Uh-oh.
Well, maybe if you want to keep talking, I'll catch up with you.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Well, I was going to say, if folks should have the presentation in their email, and I could just kind of walk us through it and tell them which slide I'm on.
Yep. Okay.
Does that work for everybody?
Yeah, and I think I'm back on. Okay. Goals of bicycle planning. Can everyone see that?
All right. Let's keep going with this then. Yeah. So bicycle planning. When we think about a bicycle network, everything kind of flows out of these three main goals, and that's safety, comfort, and connectivity. So I'm going to dig into a little bit more about what each of these means, but essentially we want a bicycle network that is truly safe for the user and for all potential users. We want folks to feel comfortable, Otherwise, they'll be discouraged from using it, and we want it to connect from different destinations and origins. So from home to work, to play, to services, that sort of thing. Next slide.
I see safe bicycle networks.
Okay, not quite up on my screen yet. There it is. That first goal, safety. So when we think about a safe bicycle network, I mean, everybody inherently, I think, knows what safety means. But we also want to think about, not just the kind of strong and fearless cyclists who are out there all the time, but folks like families or people who feel maybe less confident riding in traffic or with traffic when we think about safety. We want to think about what the conflict points are. So intersections and driveways are common ones, as well as potential conflict points along roadways. Where it's appropriate to have bicyclists riding in the road, we want to think about how do we slow traffic speeds down and promote driver awareness. And when we're getting into really high traffic areas, we want to look at either providing a physically separated facility for a bicyclist or looking at an alternative route. Next slide.
Mm-hmm.
Need a little jingle or something to play us through to the next one.
Comfortable and connected bicycle networks.
Yes. So in terms of comfort, again, a lot of it is about perception. So if your average interested bicyclist feels comfortable biking from point A to point B, they will be more likely to do so. So safety is certainly a factor in that. There also can be kind of inconvenient features that may need to be mitigated. So if there's spots where people have to dismount or walk their bikes, they may be less likely to ride. Terrain can be a big challenge, particularly in Lebanon and the greater Upper Valley region. Steep slopes are a common complaint. And we also need to think about how well connected that bike facility is. So much more likely to have people use it if it's going to be a relatively direct connection to a destination. Also thinking about transit connections. That's kind of a symbiotic relationship. So the easier it is to walk or bike to transit, the more likely you will get to have people use transit. It kind of can increase that catchment area for someone like
a last mile issue, right, Alex?
Yeah, last mile is the term that planners like to use. How do we get off the bus and to home or to work? And that the infrastructure or the safety components of that is really important in terms of walking and biking from the bus or to the bus. Next slide. So that was, really the three main goals that we look at when we think about a bicycle network. We also have to think about the users. And so through different forms of outreach and research, Federal Highway Administration has identified three main categories of cyclists in the population. So the biggest group there you'll see is the interested but concerned cyclist. So that's someone who may start a sentence by saying, well, I would ride my bike more, but, and either they're not comfortable, they don't feel safe, they don't feel like they can get directly to their destination. They are probably not comfortable riding in traffic unless it's in a neighborhood or a very slow speed road. Then a much smaller slice of the population is what we refer to as somewhat confident. So this is someone who may feel comfortable riding on a higher traffic road if there's a bike lane. So think like Bank Street or School Street, might feel comfortable riding down that kind of a road, but anything more higher traffic or more intense than that, they'll probably shy away. And then an even smaller slice, we have our highly confident cyclists. So these are folks who would feel comfortable, riding down Hanover Street and maybe taking the lane and or riding defensively to keep themselves safe in those high traffic situations. You'll also notice that these percentages don't add up to 100. There is also a decent chunk of the population who is either just not interested in bicycling for transportation or is not able to, either due to mobility limitations, health issues, where they live relative to where they need to go, that sort of thing. So we are looking at, if you add up the highest range of these, 60 to 70% of the population that we're generally planning for. Next slide. So stress is a term that will come up a lot, and that's a good term that kind of encapsulates both the safety and comfort issues that we discussed before. So we try to aim for a low stress network. So that's a network that's well connected and folks will feel comfortable and safe riding on. And some of the factors that contribute to stress are listed on the left side here. Traffic volume and speed is really the one that is on most people's mind, but there's a lot of other things that would come into play here. And Hanover Street in its current condition is actually a pretty good example of a high stress road. So you have quite a bit of traffic on there. You have a lot of intersections and curb cuts, which are potential conflict points with vehicles pulling in and out of driveways and roadways. You have on-street parking, which is a potential conflict point with people getting in and out of cars. It also pushes bicyclists to ride more in the travel lane. And the person riding their bike on the sidewalk is somewhat exemplative of this in this picture of them not feeling comfortable riding in the roadway, which is where they would be ideally. And riding on the sidewalk has its own safety challenges associated with drivers pulling out and pedestrians and that sort of thing. So it's not an ideal alternative.
Well, this is a really good example and kind of circles back to the CIP. I just wanted to say very quickly CIP projects, because this is one of the roads up for CIP improvement. So we'll be looking to see that any proposed designs address those stresses. So take
Definitely.
notes.
All right, next slide. And so Mount Support Road, by contrast, would be an example of a very low stress facility in that it is has the fully separated bike path. So not that you could do something quite like that on Hanover Street, but just to provide a contrast as in terms of what a low stress road looks like. Next slide. So those goals and considerations, they trickle down generally into a couple overall strategies for bicycle planning. So we think about a safe, connected, and low stress network as being the ultimate goal. We want to connect origins, destinations, and transit using that bicycle network. And we want to address barriers and gaps between within 1 and 2 there. So where there are pinch points, gaps in the low stress network, those become the priorities for implementing improvements. Next slide. So now I'm just going to go pretty quickly through, we've seen kind of at the higher level what the considerations and goals are for planning. Now we're just going to talk a little bit how that relates to actual physical bicycle infrastructure. So this graphic I've found to be pretty informative, especially if you've gone through some of the things we've gone through in the earlier part of the presentation. So across the top there are different types of bicycle facilities. Those in the red box are what are considered true bicycle facilities in that they create a designated space for bicyclists. You'll see the shoulder and shared lanes on the right side of the screen there. Those are considered shared spaces with vehicles, and so they're not considered a standalone bicycle facilities. That's the difference. And you'll see along the bottom here, we kind of have our scale of from interested in but concerned cyclists over to highly confident cyclists. And there are a lot more factors that would go into this. Some of the things we looked at before: traffic volume, speeds, intersections, all of that. This is pretty generalized, but it does give you a good picture of when you're planning for different user types, what you'd look at. So the interested but concerned cyclists are generally going to be more comfortable with those fully separated types of facilities on the left. So a shared use path, side path. The difference being a shared use path is basically follows its own route, whereas a side path goes directly along the side of the road. So the Mascoma Greenway would be an example of a shared use path. Side path would be what you have on Mount Support Road. Separated bicycle lane is basically, same idea, but just for bikes. And then as you get over into more to the somewhat confident group, that's where you look at kind of the painted facility. So your buffered bike lane or your regular bike lane, that's just paint on the road that designates the area where the cyclist should operate. And then we think about highly confident cyclists operating comfortably in those shared spaces. So a shoulder that hasn't been marked as a bike lane or a shared roadway. Next slide. And this is getting a little more into the nitty gritty, but it is an interesting way of thinking about when we actually look at some of those factors that we looked at before. So this is a graph that essentially talks about what types of facilities are appropriate for those interested but concerned cyclists, looking at the volume of vehicles and the speed of vehicles. So basically saying at low volume roads with low traffic speeds, those interested but concerned cyclists will be comfortable riding in the roadway. If there's, especially if there's a shared lane marking in the road. And then as you increase speed and traffic volume, you start to look at more bicycle facilities like painted bike lanes. And then at the highest end, you would look at a separated facility when you have high traffic volumes and or high vehicle speeds. And then this is, I should say, specifically for more in-town type facilities. The next slide, if you'll go to that, talks about in rural areas. So in rural areas, the assumption here is that to build something like a bike path in a truly rural area, you probably don't have enough users to justify the cost of that. So this basically looks at how wide of a shoulder you would want on a roadway. This is obviously limited by rights of way and the location of buildings along the roadway and other factors. But generally, at very low volumes and low speeds, some folks will be comfortable sharing the roadway. And then as you get to higher traffic volumes and higher speeds, you'll want to look at increasing shoulder widths. Go to the next slide.
Oh, trigger happy there.
Okay, so we kind of just talked about bicycle infrastructure in a vacuum just there. So we really just thought about who's the user and what's the speed and volume of vehicles. There's a lot of considerations that go into selecting what type of facility you would look at. So there's definitely a cost versus benefit analysis that goes into all of this. We've been told by DOT, in a normal situation where there's not a ton of land use or environmental constraints, you would assume $1 million per mile for a separated bicycle path or a side path along a roadway. So it's pretty expensive. So you want to make sure there's be enough of a demand for that type of facility to invest that money.
Yeah. We'll have to talk about that. Okay.
Yeah. Well, and that's, this is statewide, and that can be, it's context specific. So it's some places it'll be more, some places it'll be less.
Just for a quick insight, the LaHaye Drive path is 900 feet, and that's a separated facility, and that is not $1 million, but I guess that probably is about right, because it's about 720 to 50,000.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I just wanted to throw that out there as like a general reference point, and it downtown versus a suburban area versus a rural area, it's going to make a big difference. We also think, a common challenge, particularly in New England, is the amount of roadway space that's available or right-of-way space. So kind of historically, we have generally pretty narrow rights-of-way, especially in older downtowns and village centers. You have buildings that are right up to the edge of the right-of-way with small setbacks, so you don't get a whole lot of space in some areas. And you do need to think about the amount of space that somebody would need to bicycle comfortably. So there's the physical space that they operate, but then there's this concept of the shy space, which is how much space they want on either side to feel comfortable bicycling in a facility. And that is affected by things like curbing, retaining walls, things like that. That can all, those physical barriers can increase the amount of space that you need to provide someone. Here in Lebanon, steep terrain is certainly a factor. So it doesn't, in some spots, it wouldn't really matter if you had a beautiful bike path going up the road. You still would have a lot of folks who would opt not to ride a bicycle up it. And I live at the top of Prospect Street, and that's certainly some of the people I live with won't ride their bike because they don't want to ride up the hill, and I understand that. And another thing to think about too is when you have a separation between bikes and vehicles, eventually you will have an intersection or a driveway, and those can become conflict points. And so if you have a really high density of driveways or intersections, you're creating a lot of potential conflict points, and that can be a safety challenge. So separated is not always better if there is a lot of curb cuts or intersections. Next slide.
Oh, did I skip again? No, yeah.
Should be slide 14.
Yep.
These ones have some big images, so maybe it'll take a second.
Tactical and temporary improvements.
Okay. I don't see it quite yet, but I'll start talking. So everything I focused on so far has been what we'd call permanent infrastructure improvements. So actual physical infrastructure, concrete, paint, pavement. Something that has been tried with success in lots of different types of communities is what we call tactical or temporary improvements. And this is the practice of taking a low cost approach to either piloting an improvement or putting something in seasonally that delivers some sort of safety or comfort benefit. And it's a useful strategy that can either just deliver an improvement at low cost, and that's all you look at, or it can be used to test out different improvements. And an example of this, it's not a bicycle facility, but an example of kind of reclaiming roadway space would be what they've done on Court Street to provide outdoor dining. Some folks would call that a tactical improvement. So go to the next slide. And I'll go through some examples of these. And I have some links at the end of this to some good resources that show kind of how communities have done this. So this is an example, I believe, from Keene. And what they did here is they basically took a section of one of their downtown streets and basically converted the parking lane into little parklets with outdoor dining, and then used traffic tape and planters and temporary plastic bollards to put in a protected bike lane. And this was up for one day. They used it to collect a bunch of feedback from residents about how they liked it, and then they used that to inform some planning for improving bicycle access along this road. If you go to the next slide.
Oh, it keeps doing that. Okay.
I think this is in Winchester. Same idea. Basically took what had become a relatively underutilized parking area in downtown and converted into a protected bike lane, again, for I think a weekend to test it out, have folks come and try it. And I believe that the original, there was one of these, I can't remember which one, where the idea was that they were only going to put it out for a weekend, and the town ended up liking it so much that they left it up all summer.
Can we pause on this quickly,
yeah.
Alex? So this is also just a good illustration on the ground of the protected bike lane, a very standard design where it has striping, but it's not just a single line, it's a buffer between the cars and the bike lane. It's more than just the stencil, which you can kind of see. So it's really, really clear, visible guidance with that buffer, and it's a physical buffer plus these little bollards that have reflectors on them to further distinguish the separation.
Totally. Yeah, and I
it's
think
ample width. That's the last thing I'll say.
Yes. Yeah, and yeah, it nicely provides some separation away from the curb, away from the storm drain that you can see. And I believe this is all implemented for about $1,000.
Wow.
And it's traffic tape and the bollards and the stencils for the bike lane markings. And if you go to the next one. Okay, so that was kind of what I was wrapping up on in terms of tactical improvement. So that is something that this committee could think about if there's opportunities in Lebanon where, based on either kind of recent visioning or planning efforts, there's been a need identified for safer bicycle access, to test out improvements. And there's other things that can be incorporated into that, like designating temporary little parklets or other kind of public space improvements. Real quick, I just wanted to say what our role in this is as a regional planning commission. You've heard us talk about our regional corridor transportation plan. At some point in an upcoming meeting, I will maybe look to present what we have as terms of our draft chapter on the Route 120 corridor. And what we're looking to do with that is really support communities on the kind of the planning and information side of things, and securing funding to do some of these improvements. So that's where we're coming into it at. Is kind of it's a service model essentially. We're not telling anybody what to do, but we're trying to support what communities want to do locally.
So Alex, just to rephrase that, you're looking to use some of these guidelines for suggested opportunities based on the public feedback.
Yes, and we did get a lot for 120. So there's one more slide. That's pretty much it. The last slide is just some links to some resources that folks could look at when we get this posted about both kind of permanent infrastructure and some guidance on tactical improvements or temporary projects. So I think I talked for longer than I intended to, but that's all right. So and if folks have questions, happy to answer any questions, or help brainstorm about what's the role of the committee in kind of using this information to be citizen planners, if you will.
Don't forget to unmute yourselves.
Alex, what's the FHWA stand for?
Oh, sorry. Federal Highway Administration.
Yeah, thank you.
And technically, policy that comes from them is interpreted by our transportation departments. It doesn't always get applied as intended or fully, but that they do oversee the bulk of DOT work.
Yeah, and that's why some of these resources they have are particularly useful because a lot of 70 or 80% of DOT's funding comes from Federal Highway Administration. So if it's approved by Federal Highway Administration, there's typically a good chance that you can get DOT to do it or at least be in agreement with it. And so there's been quite a bit of research that's gone into developing these standards and guidance and guidelines. So it is a nice kind of trickle down resource, if you will.
Yeah, any other questions?
One comment here from Alan, that we need to consider also that e-bikes are coming. So that would change the dynamic on steep slopes, that it would allow more people to ride their bikes on the steep slopes if they felt comfortable in traffic.
Totally. I saw the other day that I think Walmart now has I think it's a $700 e-bike. And so, within a couple of years, we could see some pretty affordable models that are out there. I recently purchased an e-bike, and I've been having a great time zooming up and down the hills in the Upper Valley. So I am happy to share my experience as an e-biker when it's relevant.
Hi, I just wanted to comment that it's interesting to see how the FHWA has advanced over the past 30 years in sort of framing things or understanding things. Sort of 30 years ago when I first started looking at this, or close to that, when this committee first formed, the FHWA kind of categorized it as a basic or beginner cyclist, intermediate cyclist, and advanced cyclist. But they sort of had a pyramid, sort of like you were talking about, and they talked about how to design for the different groups, the large group of basic cyclists or, the small group of advanced cyclists. But I think the way it's evolved is a real improvement in thinking about, all the implications.
Totally. Yeah, and I think it's really helpful to think about, if you're looking at striping a bike lane, you're really kind of catering to maybe 10 to 15% of the overall population, whereas more significant traffic calming or separated facilities, you're looking at 50+% of the population that will maybe potentially use that. But then there's of course different levels of investment that come along with either of those and costs. So it nicely frames the trade-offs that are available.
And I'll just add, this really is an aggregation of the best guidance that's out there. That was their intention in forming this. And we have a void at the state level. We don't have an active Complete Streets committee at this time. So in lieu of that presence, really do want to lean on these types of resources. And I know you don't always want to have like webinars or educational items, but we hope to integrate this into upcoming planning and engineering documents to the extent it needs to be tailored to Lebanon's specific needs.
Another point that when we talk about $1 million per mile for a separated bike path, we maybe should compare that to how much it would cost for a car road. Then the $1 million may not look so big when you compare it to how much it would cost to put a car road in there. Another point is that one of the elephants in the room is the driver. That if you have drivers who are more bike conscious, then the ratings, the comfort levels will increase even for some of these bike lanes. For example, I was riding a bike in Copenhagen one time on a separated bike lane, and there was a truck which was going past me in the motor vehicle lane with his right turn signal on. So I stopped. I thought, okay, this guy's going to cut me off and hit me. So I stopped, and the truck stopped too. And then the truck driver was waving me on, saying, no, you go first. You have the right of way. So it's an example where the driver's mentality is another factor that could help people to feel more comfortable, even if the engineering is less.
Absolutely. And another thing this doesn't touch on is bicycle safety education, which is very important. And I think, that both taking that on from both sides is very important. But I think the education piece can help people understand how to ride more safely in different contexts and avoid some common safety conflicts or issues that come up as well. So it doesn't just start and end with infrastructure as well. It's a holistic process for sure.
But one last comment, even with infrastructure, your photograph of that new tactical change, you show the sewer grading, which chews up about more than half of the bike lane was taken up by that sewer grading. And that's a problem. We have the same issue here in Lebanon, where you have a painted bike lane, say on Bank Street, but then you have these sewer gradings, which takes up a big chunk, more than half of the width of the bike lane. And whether we can have some engineering solution for that, instead of having these open gratings, to have something that a bike could safely go over.
Totally. Yeah, and I think that's, when you look at doing bicycle improvements in the context of a road reconstruction or overall road improvement, like the city is looking at for Hanover Street, you can address some of those concerns by, integrating drainage systems, under the sidewalk. They do make bicycle-friendly drains, which I'm not sure how in a northern New England winter would hold up or not, but there's an opportunity to think about those things comprehensively when you kind of plan comprehensively, if you will.
Yeah.
Oh, lost you.
Can you hear me
Okay. Yes.
Okay.
Well, thanks, Alex. I'm going to post this to the web unless you have any tweaks, but I think it looked good from this end. And thanks for taking that course. And as a reminder to people, there are a lot of free materials out there, or if you, in this day and age of Zoom webinars, see ones that appeal to you and they have a small fee, the city will cover that too. So good to be aware. Thanks.
Yeah, great. Thanks very much, Alex. That was really good. And hopefully that's a good foundation for some of the work we have to do ahead of us to get a bike and ped plan in place. Let's move on to study item C and the communication plan. And Maria, as we've done the last couple of months, if you can take us through this month's page of the communication plan, that would be great, and we can see where we can get to, given the current situation.
Okay. Can everyone hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So just like last month, looking ahead, the communications plan, we had pegged July and August both as months to piggyback on the farmers market and general nice weather and do, tabling and possibly a group ride or workshop. So last month we had sort of agreed that none of that was quite ready to be implemented, given that people are still trying to stay home more and distance. So we had talked about looking instead, looking at the resources online, the Ped Bike resources, and seeing how we can make better use of those. So I know Rebecca had sent out an email encouraging us once again to take a look and to provide comments, and maybe we could have only a very short discussion here tonight. Rebecca, did you get any comments from anyone?
I did, from Alan.
Okay.
And one of his was it helps with security to have PDFs that open up as new tabs instead of requiring people to download certain files, such as for his crash analyses. And he also noted, hold on a second, that, let's see. Uh-oh, I'm losing where it is. Okay, and then, no, I think that was the main comment, but Alan, maybe you had some others.
Yes, if I may add one or two. I think additional resources, while sounding very scientific, may be a bit not clear for some people just passing through, whether one could have a better name for that, like additional information, for example, would be one. But possibly there are some other things I have as well, but whether we want to have a working group to look at it and to make some suggestions if people would have more time to take a look at it. So for example, in the subheading, you say, as it relates to the Ped Bike Committee, maybe you can change that to say as relates to biking and walking in Lebanon, because it's more general. It's how what people can look at to how they can use it, not as it refers to our Ped Bike Committee.
Okay.
So that's a few of the general comments. But if people haven't had a chance to look at it, one could think about a small working group to come up with some suggestions. I think it's great. I really appreciate your initiative to make that happen. There's a lot of good stuff on there.
Thanks. I'll just add to one of my own recommendations from the email to get the quarterly reports up on there when we do have written versions. As we've done that for Heritage Commission at least, and it's a good repository for looking more comprehensively about the progress of the committee over time. And then I was also just thinking during Alex's presentation, where do we want to put this type of information? And I can share my screen for a minute so you can look at what we have here. So if we look at the Pen Bike additional resources or additional information page, as we might want to call it, where would something like his presentation go? Would it go under documents, studies, and reports? Right now, that's probably the best spot. And then within there, we would want to have, as my page loads very slowly, be something like design guidance. And this is where we want to draw some lines, and whether there's a working group or not on this. Anything we have, you could throw in the whole kitchen sink, but we want to try to be as locally and regionally relevant as possible. So right now, we have our complete streets policy linked and the master plan transportation chapter linked. So if we added a subheading like design guidance, it would be something like his presentation that has local examples. Another thing that this might resonate with Tom would be, we can only put so many details and examples into regulatory documents, but this would be a great location to have examples of bike storage that is encouraged for projects, where you could point an applicant to in order to see what the basic guidelines and examples of where else in Lebanon they're being applied are. So I'll stop there, but those were a couple of my own thoughts.
Do people have thoughts? Oh, go ahead, Alan.
Again, I think there's two audiences we're looking at. One is studies, documents, and planning documents for people with more technical insight. And another one is for general population in Lebanon. How do I find out about peds and biking in Lebanon? Possibly you can put something on the frequently asked questions on the city website. I bumped into that where I ran a search. As I met someone with their dog off the leash, which came bounding up to me. And when I said, you need to keep your dog on the leash, she said, no, Lebanon doesn't have any regulation about leashing your dog. When I searched the city website under the FAQs, I came up with nothing. One had to go all the way down into the RSAs to find it. So possibly if you can have a link made to the FAQs under the city website, and then link it to information that the public needs to know about ped bike issues, safety, etc. So this information will be divided into two categories, one for general population and one for more technical folks like the Ped Bike Committee, and link it to the FAQs on the city website.
Mm-hmm.
This is Alex. I will just add that there is a lot of good resources out there on kind of general, obviously it wouldn't be like Lebanon specific, but general kind of bike and ped safety or planning or things like that. And so it's probably, there's some balance between putting a lot of information on there, but also not recreating the wheel. But, for example, like there's the Ped Bike Information Center is a really good website. You could probably rely pretty heavily on things like that if there is a desire to put more kind of general information up. But yeah, that doesn't quite get to the, what is Lebanon's policy or what information is available locally about certain issues.
One of my goals was to, like you said, not reinvent the wheel, Alex. So where possible to link to some sites like that are vetted and referred to, especially in our regulatory documents like that FHWA, small town rural communities guide. But like when Ebikes came about and we didn't have any guidance anywhere, there was kind of a mad rush to get something posted locally about them. So, but now everyone's back up to speed on providing that guidance. So I don't feel like that has to be as detailed on our page. So it's not something I have the bandwidth to continuously update and monitor, especially because I don't do the updates directly. They go through someone else who's quite busy, especially during the pandemic time. So once we do get some robust recommendations that we feel will truly enhance the utility and frequency of reference to this site, let's try to bucket them together and maybe do it in rounds in the future, unless they're obviously more routine things like crash analysis or quarterly updates, but to try to keep it in an organized update would be ideal.
Yeah, so with that in mind, and going back to Alan's suggestion of a working group, I mean, is there any interest from 2 or 3 people in doing that to take some of the burden off Rebecca, can take the lead on, help, like as Alan suggested, perhaps, addressing maybe some language changes and otherwise helping kind of finish things off.
Well, I suggested it, so Alan, I should be ready to volunteer.
Yeah.
And it could be a very short exercise, just a matter of you all organizing a one-time list of language or link changes and bringing it back to the board for approval. It doesn't have to be an ongoing commitment.
Yeah.
I can help.
Thank you, Marie.
This is Alex. I will help with that as well.
All right. Okay, I think we have our group to figure it out. So I'll let you three organize yourselves and get Rebecca, if you want to give them any input on what you need, then we can kind of go forward.
I was just going to add for other members, if you're like me and didn't really get to review too much in detail before tonight's meeting, if you are still interested in taking a look and you have comments, at this point, probably safe to send them to Alan, myself, Alex, of course, Rebecca as well, but make sure that it gets to one of the 3 of us.
For all of you that enjoy hearing about wildlife, we just had a gray fox come through the yard. Presently picking up a mouse off the back lawn.
Yeah.
Erling, I think I saw that fox walking up the sidewalk on Prospect Street a couple months ago.
Yeah, it comes every night, just about this time.
Yeah, I think we've seen them around as well, or maybe it's the same gray fox. I don't know. But, yeah.
There was a red fox down your way, also, Colin.
Yeah. I've seen it walking up and down through our yard. Maybe having to go after the groundhogs that we seem to have a increasing number of.
We had fox kits playing in the yard, tossing back and forth, running into each other, knocking them down, and climbing back up and running around for about half an hour about a month ago.
Nice. All right. Okay, great. Well, so was there anything else on the communications plan for tonight?
I don't believe so.
That was the main item I recall.
Great. Rebecca, on the agenda, we have the quarterly report to the City Council, which forgive me if I don't quite remember. I think, did you share that with everybody? The one that I gave?
I did not. I should do that. Sorry,
Okay.
I forgot to email that out.
That's fine. So I won't go over it now. I think we gave the quarterly report last week to the City Council in their meeting, and Rebecca will share that. And as we discussed as well, I think one of the ideas will be to kind of get those posted regularly on the site. All right. Is there anything else for tonight that actually I did want to go back one thing, bicycle friendly community. I think Alan, am I right, Alan, you found the application from last time, which Rebecca was having trouble tracking down.
Part of it.
Found part of it.
One section of it I could find, at least changes to it.
Yeah, and that was helpful. Thank you, Alan. I think have a good amount to work with. I haven't heard back from the organization that runs it, but I'll contact them again. They must surely have it. So,
Yeah.
but this is helpful just to get the ball rolling. Oh, I hear a lag.
You know, I think we're getting better all the time at that, and I was thinking that I hope there's a way we can get Alex's presentation, if not included, but mentioned, you know, in our next application. I think that was very impressive, that presentation, and I think a reviewer looking at if people are doing that kind of work, maybe we should move them up.
That's a great point. I don't know if I would have even thought of it, Jake, to say that. It probably would have been bulked under. We have a lot of resources on our website, but to say that we actively strive to make those involved with decision making aware of best practices.
Yeah, you know, file it as an appendix to our application or something. Could I bring up something before we adjourn, Colin? Would that be?
Yeah.
It's more or less under education and encouragement on other business. How do people think about spending some time at the August meeting about how we might cautiously promote bike riding in the cold weather? You guys have all probably seen all the newspapers. Bike riding is exploding in, you know, the major metropolitan areas of the country because people want to stay off mass transit. We don't have that issue, but the timing could be right that we could say in September, perhaps maybe October, even November, some sort of a communication to the community about, you know, the pros and cons of riding in the cold. We could have a discussion about, you know, how, if we like that idea, how we could best accomplish that. So anyway,
Yeah.
We don't have to talk about it too much now, but I was just wondering if we could maybe spend 10 minutes in September, see what people think.
Yeah. I think that's a great idea. I mean, I think, you know, helping people understand how they might extend the season a little bit would be good. So we'll pencil that in onto the agenda.
Well, thank you. It's great.
All right. Anything else?
On bicycling in cold weather, we've had quite a few interactions with people down in Meriden on the ledges where they're bicycling down the trails that you're going up skiing. And a bike can be quite threatening to somebody coming up the hill when the bike's coming down and the biker is unable to slow down, stop, or get around you very well.
Yeah,
Can lead to some interesting interactions.
yeah, yeah. I know we want to adjourn, but you run into a lot of fat tire bikes down in that Old French's Ledges area. So that's a good example you bring up. That's something that we could caution people. Hey, you fat tire bikers, let's be careful when you're going down. Stuff like that. Clothes to wear. Be careful. It gets dark early. Be prepared. It's real cold. We could help people, maybe promote it a little. I'm always a little, as I've said in these meetings in the past, every once in a while, I'm very leery about promoting biking because it's dangerous. We focus more on let's just try to make it safe and, therefore promote it that way. But I think maybe to push people to some cold weather riding now. I used to do it when I was commuted to Hitchcock. I'd do it when I was in the high 30s, and I was no wizard at it, but it can be done. It's kind of fun too because nobody else is doing it. Anyway, we'll talk about it next week.
One of the recommendations during the SARS outbreak in China in 2003 was to get out on a bike. It was a whole lot safer riding your bike than it was going in public transportation during the SARS outbreak, as it is in COVID-19 outbreak as well.
Yeah. Yeah, you guys probably see, I get the New York Times and buying a bike now in Manhattan is like ordering a Harley Davidson. You got to wait a year.
This is a related question, this is Alex. I should know this. Is the Mascoma Greenway, is that plowed in the winter for bicycling, or is that a plot?
It is half of it's plowed. So I don't know if it's as you go from Lebanon to West Lebanon, the left side, the high side is plowed, and then the right side is sometimes groomed, depending on the snow conditions.
Okay.
Sometimes
I just wonder if we can, as a committee, maybe make a statement or recommendation about winter maintenance of pedestrian and bicycle facilities this winter, given folks' potential aversions to using advanced transit or whatever. If there's and generally, I think right now we're able to like socially distance outside, but in the winter those opportunities are going to become less and less available. So keeping those facilities in good condition for folks to use safely is going to be really important.
That's a good would be a good thing to cover. Yeah.
I agree with that, but actually they did quite a good job on the Greenway. It was plowed, where it was easy to walk and biking as well, except as it gets a bit warmer, then you have the melting during the day and freezing at night. That's difficult to maintain.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's we'll put that on the agenda for next time. Cold weather biking and maintenance of infrastructure. Is there anything else or a motion to adjourn?
One last thing, if I may, with the 3 minutes left, that I had mentioned before that someone told me they were going to repave the Prospect Street extension and put in one separate additional space for walkers and bikers to going to the middle school. And that's actually going to start. The construction was started, I think, yesterday, actually. So that's moving ahead. It's not clear if there's going to be extra space or any extra line for a bike and or walking lane on the road. Maybe Rebecca could check on that, or Alex could give us a report, because it's going to go right in front of his place.
That's interesting. I looked at the Hillcrest construction drawings. And I was looking for stuff like that, but I didn't see anything. So it must be coming under some other improvement.
Because it was interesting. One of the property owners told me that he had surrendered some of his land, that it was going to be used for a path for people to walk or bike on. So
Yeah, I'll have to ask.
My understanding is that the land takings were just for drainage easements and that they weren't going to widen the road at all, but I could be wrong.
Okay, I only heard a rumor, no solid information.
Yeah, same here. So
Thinking back about the greenway and maintenance of it, and the bike pad, I'm not sure where you classify cross-country skier as a pedestrian or not, but certainly is an activity I would think that we would want to be promoting and encouraging that be tracked and maintained for that on that side, which they did a very good job with.
So maybe a motion to thank that type of an action, and we can be a little specific whenever the committee's ready about things to keep encouraging and specifically to hope for improvements too.
Positive response from actions that you'd like to see repeated is quite often a good method. Would you like a motion to adjourn?
All right, thanks, Sterling. Is there a second?
I'll second. This is Marie.
Seconded by Marie. All right, and we need to do a roll call vote. This is Colin. I'm going to vote in favor. Erling.
Erling votes aye.
Cliff.
I vote yes. Clifton here.
Jake.
Yes.
Marie.
Yes.
Alex.
Alex votes yes.
Tom.
Tom votes yes.
Alan.
Alan votes yes.
Did I get everyone? Anyone that voted?
1, 2, 3,
All right.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
We have everyone. All right, I think that was unanimous. So we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you all in a month's time, and enjoy the summer.
Happy midway through 2020.
Yeah.
Oh, geez.
It can only get better, right?
There you go.
Okay. Thank you,
The
everyone.
fox,
Take
All right.
the
care.
fox has also left the dining table.
Any
Celtic
bears?
start.
Any bears that way also?
All right. Bye-bye.
Okay, stopping the recording.
Take care.
Good night, everyone.
Night.
Bye-bye.